Hello again. It is still Monday, I believe. It is definitely October the 7th, the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary since the October 7th uprising that took place in Gaza, in Israel, a year ago. We can talk about that now. Uh, I just really want to kind of wrap up the previous year. I really thought that the Israelis would have gotten rid of Benjamin Netanyahu by the turn of the year, beginning of the year. How wrong I was there. Um, this psychopath is still in charge, and he's still making psychopathic fucking statements. A guy set himself on fire. A journalist, photojournalist from CBS yesterday at one of these rallies for Palestinian rights and ending the fucking genocide taking place in Gaza. Guy set himself on fire. He wrote that he was upset because as a photojournalist for CBS, he had to continually denigrate the people who were killed, the 41,800 plus Palestinians who were killed, labeling them all as Hamas, including the 16,500 children who died as a result. And it was too much for him, and he, in protest, set himself on fire. CBS quickly jumped in with a statement saying that this man was fired because clearly he had lost his objectivity in the situation. This is the definition of objectivity, and this is why that man set himself on fire. That employee of theirs set himself on fire. They refused to see it. They refused to be able to look at it. It's like people you talk to down here about what's happening, and what's on its way down to Tampa. Look, what are you talking about? You're just a fear monger. Get away from me. They refuse. It's a defense mechanism. And it's the same thing for corporations and the people who, corporate fucking minded asswipes who run them. They said he had lost his objectivity. The definition of which, I suppose, means that you have to always paint Israel as the perpetual victim and never, ever, ever point out the war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide they commit while they're doing it, even though it's obvious what they're doing. It is obvious what they're doing. I did a video the other day talking about where we are now, basically, and I showed you a bunch of statistics and talked about all the different schools and hospitals and institutions that they blew up in Gaza. And there are folks out there like fucking Bill Maher who will say, yeah, but the tunnels underneath them. The tunnels, how do you know there's a tunnel underneath them? Well, there is. Who said so? The IDF. The IDF who did what? Who blew up a church or a school or a mosque or a university. Why? Because the tunnels. How do you know the tunnels are there? Because they told us. It's circular logic, and it's the invisible tunnels. The invisible tunnels. There's a tunnel underneath there. And they even got the alt media repeating this bullshit about the tunnels. Oh, yeah, but there are tunnels, but the tunnels are amazing. There are no tunnels. They don't exist. This is a justification. The imaginary tunnels. The secret tunnels. That's why they blow up schools and hospitals and fucking mosques and police stations and post offices and tunnels. It is propaganda. They are lies. They are despicable fucking lies told by despicable fucking people to justify despicable fucking acts. Period. End of story. And we are still here talking about it. And a guy set himself on fire from CBS, and his employer shit on him. Because he dared to say the quiet part out loud. What so many of them are suffering from. He couldn't bear living in anymore in a system where he had to fucking lie about child murderers every goddamn day of his professional life. This is where we are. And he was, as BB pointed out, he was one of 4 who have taken that route. And I certainly hope there are no more. I certainly hope this whole thing comes to a fucking head. This comes to an end. 41,800 people are dead. 16,500 of them are children. Someone from the Pentagon said about 4 months ago, and I covered it, I forget his name, said there's no way you can accidentally kill 35,000 people. There's no way you accidentally kill all those civilians. There's just no way. Watching an old fucking thing on of Noam Chomsky discussing, this is 8 years ago or so, the situation with Palestine and Gaza and West Bank and Israel. He gave a nice breakdown of how we are where we are. He talked about, I thought it was interesting. He mentioned Resolution 242 in November of 1967, but he also mentioned the fact that it didn't reference Palestinians at all. It ignored the existence of Palestinians. He also talked about the difference between the map of 1948, the proposed map of 1948, and the map that was accepted by the international community, which established the Green Line in 1949, and the differences, albeit small, but still significant enough differences between the two. And that was the understood definition between Israel, the Jewish part of Palestine, and the Palestinian, the Arab part of Palestine. He also talked about the fact that he gave a rundown of all the different efforts and resolutions. The first fucking Camp David Accord in 1978, and how that basically failed because they were trying to, they were using that one and the one in 2000. They were both using the Resolution 242 from November of 1967 as a basis by which to. And I've talked about Resolution 242 and the weaknesses in it, the strengths, relative strengths and weaknesses in it. But I thought it was interesting that he also mentioned in 1976 there was another resolution that was actually almost identical to 242. However, it did mention Palestine and stated that the Israelis had to leave the occupied territories of Palestine. I forget that resolution, but it was in 1976. And it was accepted throughout the world at the UN, with the exception of one, us. And we vetoed it. And as he points out, when you veto something like that, it really vetoes it from the annals of history. You have to work hard to find that actual resolution. I will find that before this storm comes in. I'll try to today. And I'll post a link to it. And that one was a much better resolution. But the issue with, I saw Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was bemoaning the Palestinian people who are supporting Palestine this weekend out there across the world, not just the United States, but across the world, showing their support for the people of Palestine this 1-year anniversary. And she says, the weakness of these people are, you talk to these young people, you say, well, what happened in 2000? They don't know what happened in 2000. I know exactly what happened in 2000, and fucking Noam Chomsky damn sure knows what happened in 2000. And the official story is that the Palestinian delegation was resistant. They had a perfect fucking deal set, but the Palestinian resistance, they said no because they wanted to wipe the Jews off the fucking planet or some stupid shit. And that's what she was suggesting. That's what she's always suggested. because she is a globalist, racist bitch. The reality was, even the guy from Israel, who was there, part of the negotiating team, later said in an interview that it would have been foolish for the Palestinians to accept it. Of course they didn't accept it. Basically, as Noam Chomsky pointed out, the 2000 Camp David Accord, as opposed to the 1978 Camp David Accord, the 2000 Camp David Accord got close, but ultimately, in the end, their interpretation of 242, since it doesn't specify, really, when they say you must leave occupied territories, it doesn't say all the occupied territories or the occupied territories. It just said you must leave occupied territories, that it would leave Israeli settlements and businesses near the water-producing areas in the West Bank, and it would leave all these settlements and these towns that they have built up in Palestinian soil. It would leave them in control of East Jerusalem, which is the capital of Palestine. And it would create basically Bantustans. And that's a term he used because he used that term because fucking Bishop Desmond Tutu used that fucking word in reference to West Bank. It would leave the West Bank and Gaza busted up into these Bantustans, controlled and policed by the Israelis, by the IDF. And so, of course, the Palestinian delegation said no. And of course, when they said no and they left, of course, the Palestinians are, you can't negotiate with them. They didn't take this deal. Show us the map you offered. No. Show us the map you offered that they rejected. Fuck you. And as Noam Chomsky points out accurately, it's almost impossible to find that map as well. But it does exist, and in scholarly journals you can find it. I'm sure if you looked hard enough you could find it. That's the second Camp David Accord, 2000, projected or proposed map from the Americans and the Clintons and the Israelis. So of course they refused. You know, I've said this tons of times, and I wrote this tons of times, and I'll say it again. What they want, the reason that they want, well, you got to at least concede and admit that Hamas are evil terrorists and they have to get out. They try to get you to do that. As somebody, they try to get fucking Norman Finkelstein to do that, and of course many others to do that. And if they're worth half their fucking weight in fucking salt, then they will of course say, go fuck yourself. I'm not saying that. But you're not a Hamas supporter, are you? The whole point is to regime change Gaza and put in place a complicit collaborator like they have in the West Bank. Somebody who will allow Israeli businesses, Israeli settlements, the IDF to come in and turn it into Bantustans so they can profit from the territory. And of course now, because of that, when you look at a map held up by fucking Bibi Netanyahu, you will notice that there's only one sliver left of Palestine. And that's Gaza. Because since they have a collaborator or collaborators running the West Bank as their puppets, they consider the West Bank entirely theirs already. These are facts. So when they say, yes, genocide is bad and they should come to an end, there should be a ceasefire, but you have to concede Hamas are terrorists who have to be removed, and somebody solid, as Joe Biden would put it, has to be put in charge, then that's what they're talking about. And if they get you to fucking concede that, then you have already lost. You are already their fucking tool. And I want to make that perfectly clear to anybody, perhaps people running solidarity fucking movements in places like, I don't know, Abbotsford, If this is what you believe, if this is what you talk about, if this is what you say about Hamas, then you are already Benjamin Netanyahu, 8,200 unit, Hasbara, Mossad's tool. Because you are promoting regime change in Gaza, which is exactly what they want. Over a decade ago, Chomsky was talking about the Greater Israel Project. And that this was all part and parcel. You can go back to November of 1967 and Resolution 242, and how the Soviets were asked to push for a resolution to get fucking Israel's occupation out of fucking, after the 6-Day War, out of fucking Gaza and out of the fucking West Bank and, of course, Golan Heights. And they did so, but then it was put together by the Brits and the Americans. The actual thing was written by the Brits and the Americans. That's why it is written in such a way that, legally speaking, there's wiggle worm for the Zionists to stay there and keep it. Okay? That is part and parcel of the Greater Israel Project, which has been in existence since before the creation of Israel, when it was still Palestine. These are all facts. This is not something new. This is something that is very, very old. You have to understand that. If they can't take the whole of Palestine for themselves and call it Israel, then how are they going to take chunks of Syria, Turkey, Iraq? How are they going to take chunks of Saudi Arabia? How are they going to take all of fucking Jordan? How are they going to take all of fucking Lebanon? If they can't do the easy part, then the Greater Israel Project is dead in the water. And that's what we're fucking talking about. That's the fucking battle. That's why it still lingers on to this fucking day, a year later. That's why so many people have died. For them to concede that Palestine exists and to remove, it's not about what they lose in terms of business or in terms of property or in terms of development in the West Bank and Gaza. It's what they lose in terms of business, in terms of profit, in terms of development in Lebanon, in Jordan, in parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq and fucking Turkey and Syria. That's the big picture. That's the big money. And they aren't about to fucking give up on that. So here we are. 1 year into this. I don't know if I have anything on my website fresh and new to discuss. Oh, yeah. This is from my work on the Hannibal Directive. And I think it's, again, important to point out. I saw somebody, I think it was El Mayadeen, they were talking about, what happened on October the 7th, and they said about 1,100 people were killed. That's the first and only place, aside from me, that's giving you the actual numbers. Here's the reality. The reality is many of those people were killed by the IDF. And that's a fact. And that's not something that's debatable. That's just reality. Israel's own fucking leading paper, Haaretz, published something. When did I write this? When did I publish this? I don't know. In July of 2024, I guess. It started November 27th, 2023. Israel admits to immense amount of friendly fire on October the 7th. How many Israeli civilians died on October the 7th? How many were killed by the IDF? And the 539 civilians. These are all stuff that I wrote to deal with this subject matter. There's tons of it. If you go to the Hannibal Directive category over here, you can find all this stuff. Remember when they came out with that fucking video? Because Haaretz did interviews with the fucking commanders who said, yes, they opened fire. Of course, they didn't want to admit that shit. And of course, they came up with the girl power fucking team so that they could couch it in identity politics, couch acceptance of this horrendous atrocity in the acceptance of the cover of fucking feminism and young feminism. Girl power. The young girls who were the team of the tank team who opened fire on a building because there were some Palestinians in there, but there were scores also of Israelis in there. And that's okay because they're girls. Yeah, it's awful, but, hey, look at the girls. And all these burned fucking cars. I told you before, there's no fucking way they had that many goddamn Molotov cocktails to burn all those fucking cars. And they weren't parked like that. They've been moved like that to prep them for burial. What could possibly burn and destroy so many fucking vehicles? Were they all carrying satchels full of fucking Molotov cocktails? No. Besides, gas fire wouldn't do that to them. However, we do know that the Israeli fucking attack helicopters, Apache attack helicopters, provided by you and my tax money, were firing incendiary rounds. And that is what a Gatling gun attached to a fucking Apache attack helicopter firing incendiary rounds does to vehicles. And that's how so many fucking civilians died. These are facts. Destroyed by Israel, blamed on Hamas. These are facts. Which, previous report by the Cradle affirmed that Israeli attack helicopters killed concertgoers at Nova, including many who were burned alive by missiles and high-caliber incendiary machine gun fire. Haaretz report came earlier in June. A report by UN Independent International Committee of Inquiry found that Israeli forces had intentionally killed Israelis to avoid giving the Palestinians the upper hand in possible negotiations. Here's a bunch of shit. Here's a bunch of stuff. Come here and read this. Again, I don't know of anybody, like my previous video, I was talking about the epigenetic reprogramming of aging. I don't know of anybody else really focusing on it. But we must focus on it because it is reality. And this is why it's important. The Hannibal Directive is very closely linked to the Samson option. And the Samson option is quite simple. They will pull the temple down around their heads before giving up on something, a program that is so fucking important to them, that has been there since the foundation of Israel. It's like the previous video I talked about, the masters of the universe. They want more fucking life. And they are willing to sacrifice as many of us as need be in order to give the scientists enough time to figure out the epigenetic reprogramming of aging. By the same token, the Israelis are willing to sacrifice whatever it takes, whether it's Palestinian children, American soldiers, Iranian civilians or Israeli Jews to get to the greater Israel fucking project, to keep it at least alive. They know that Hamas is not going anywhere. They know that the resistance of Palestine is not going anywhere. They know that they can't just come through and wipe them out with nukes without the rest of the world turning their fucking backs on them and then becoming a full-on pariah state and launching a fucking war which will probably cost Israel. They are in a bad situation. They were put there by Hamas and the Palestinian fucking resistance groups exactly 1 year ago today. It is literally now or never for them. That's the fucking world we live in. And that's where we are today. More people need to recognize and talk about what the IDF did exactly 365 days ago. Who's really responsible for the vast number of fucking Israeli civilians who were killed? The truth is out there. The information is out there. The news is out there. It's been reported by Haaretz, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, and a few, like The Intercept, like The Gray Zone, a few alt publications in the United States. A few. Not nearly enough. And none on the alt-right. Zero on the alt-right. This is where we are. But the good news is people are still out there. They're still protesting. They're still standing up for what's right. They're still standing up for humanity. They're still standing up for... No one is saying no to the existence of Israel. No one is saying that. What we're saying is yes to the existence of Palestine based on the pre-June fucking 1967 Green Line borders that were established in 1949. Israel and Palestine, side by side, living in peace. What we're saying no to is the greater fucking Israel project. Expansionism. It's always been about expansionism. The reason they wrote fucking Resolution 242 in November of 1967 the way they did was in order to preserve expansionism, the possibility of expansionism for the proponents of greater Israel. That's what we're saying no to. That's what we've been saying no to the whole time. No one that I know of is saying Israel should be wiped off the map. And I am certainly not saying that. I'm saying the dreams of the new Middle East and the greater Israel project must be put to bed once and for all. I thank you for your time.